What made you decide, hey, I'm going to go to law school? And then what made you say, I'm going to Amazon?
Somebody say that I wasn't technical. And my reaction was like, first of all, F you. I got a law degree and 20 years of experience in tech and 2 patents. Like, you want to say I'm not technical? Watch me.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast. It's so great to have Cecilia Ziniti with me today. She is the founder and CEO of GC.ai. And just hearing her thoughtful, smart, but also strong-willed opinion, I was like, I need to get to know you better because you're not only doing something really, really cool in AI. I don't even know if you knew this, but I have a legal background myself. I went to law school a long time ago. I decided not to become a lawyer. I did pass the bar, did all that other good stuff. And now you're the next generation of that. And AI is, of course, changing every company, every role that's out there. So Cecilia, it is such a pleasure having you with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. I'm excited to be here, and it was great to meet you.
Yes. So the first thing would love for you to walk us through a little bit. It's just your background, right? Part of what makes you so fascinating to me is you've had the pleasure, luck, I don't know, maybe challenges, of course, of working for some really, really successful startups out there and being their general counsel. What got you into that? Why did you go in that direction? And then what led you to say, you know what? I'm done with working for all these other people. I'm going to go take all these lessons, hopefully, and go do it myself.
Yeah. So I came to Silicon Valley in the early 2000s and have always been kind of just a lawyer for tech. So joined Yahoo when it was still competing with Google and just got fascinated by this sort of intersection of law and tech. Went to law school and then lucky enough to work for Morrison & Foerster, which did, where I represented Apple against Samsung, right? Literally like birth of the smartphone. So super fun. And through it all, it was kind of like, what are these tech waves that happen? And so, saw the early internet, saw sponsored search, saw mobile take off, cloud when I started doing SaaS agreements at the firm. And then was lucky enough, went to work at Amazon. And when I got hired at Amazon, I thought, surely they want me to work on the Fire Phone because that was rumored then. And then I get there and they're like, no, actually, the more senior attorneys are going to work on that. We want you to work on this device, which turned out to be Alexa. And it didn't work at the time, completely alpha. But the unifying theme has always been like, how is life going to be different with this tech? And so for me, startups were the next natural place because, I had seen, the Alexa group go from essentially a skunkworks alpha group, I think it was maybe the engineers weren't even broken out from the general device team. Through to, by the time we launched, it was a big group, I think 14 VPs and, thousands. And so now I think Alexa engineering is up to 10,000 people. But having seen that and having seen really just being inspired, honestly, I would still call Amazon founder led. There's a thing where Jeff Bezos, they say that Amazon is scaffolding built around his brain. And I've seen that. So for me, going to startups, my first startup was Anki, and the CEO, Boris Softman, had an incredible vision. And I sort of realized I want to be close to that and really that point of making a vision real. And so I saw startups as the way to do that and have found startups that have had really interesting legal issues. Replit was a fascinating one, reaching now, I think there are 30 million users, but interesting issues around kind of privacy and cloud and IP and, building their own AI. And so that's been the unifying theme. And then, like you said, I got the startup bug to do my own thing.
And when you think through, just going back to some of that history for yourself, what made you decide, hey, I'm going to go to law school and then want to go even then from going to big firm, you're kind of doing the dream stuff, right? When you're an early lawyer, remember all my friends from law school, we're going to go to a big firm and then what made you say, I'm going to Amazon? Was it because you wanted to chill out? Because that's what some people do when they go in-house. Or was it no, I want to work harder because I think that's what Amazon's mental focus is and learn about tech. Why did you even make that transition?
Yeah. So look, what was fascinating to me, the experience at the law firm was excellent. And I do, people sometimes down on big law, but you make a lot of money, which of course is really nice and gives you freedom and liberty, which now I'm, was able to bootstrap GCAI for a period from having had that experience. But really law firms, they teach you, and we'll get into this later, I think, just a standard of excellence and a standard of critical thinking. And of course there's the grind, right? Every profession has its grind gears, right? Doctors with residency and, lawyers with this, consultants, whatever it is. But if you're a knowledge worker, like engaging with lots and lots of interesting, varied work and even uninteresting. I actually didn't mind doc review. That's why I'm really good at AI now, because I've reviewed thousands of documents. People used to joke. I supported the marketing team at Cruise, and the CMO at the time was like, "How are you so fast at reading?" I'm like, "I don't know, like lots of law school and reading thousands of documents for cases." And so I'm just like randomly like a fast reader. So I think I carry with me those experiences. But as to the why, I think it was like I was always getting closer and closer to the customer and the tech. And, just was inspired. I think I do sometimes, I'm not going to lie. A lot of us in-house get FOMO when the law firm salaries, which are published, go up.
Yeah.
So the profession has evolved, but the point of like, I think big law is great training. And then, for me, like I wanted law plus, and that's what I've been able to find in my career. And now, I definitely use my legal skills every day. I am also the GC of GCAI, although, as we'll talk about, I obviously have a great, plethora of outside partners and folks that help us.
And what did you see at all these companies you went to? I mean, Amazon even included. What were those entrepreneurial underpinnings that you think made some of those entrepreneurs like great? And maybe before you answer that, actually, why don't we back up and define even like excellence? Like what is real excellence as an entrepreneur? Is it having this like clear vision? Is it being able to delegate a ton? Like what are these things that you think make someone an excellent entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, this is a loaded one. There are so many, but I think it's probably three things. So the vision itself, and really seeing what the world should or could be like in a better way. It's like that, to me, that's been something that great entrepreneurs that I've seen, including my dad. My dad's an entrepreneur, and the ability to see something that's not there and literally build it. That's what I would say. And then, so vision, and then resourcefulness. I mean, those are the other, but yeah.
Do you think having that vision though, I mean, a lot of people claim they have vision and think they see around corners, but obviously very few people actually do. So is it then finding that resourcefulness to it?
Exactly.
And why do then most people fail? Because once again, you and I both know hundreds, probably thousands of entrepreneurs who tried it and have failed in many ways. And like something didn't go right. Is it luck?
Yeah. I mean, like I think like, you can definitely learn from failure, but I think it's like, I got asked one time on a panel, and it wasn't even an entrepreneur concept. It was just like life advice. And it was like, how do you do it? Because it was like, oh, you have kids and you have gone to law school and you've done all these amazing things. How do you do it? And my answer, like, I didn't think it was particularly profound at the time, but I've since revisited, and the feedback on the panel was so good. It's like, you just do. Like, that would leave you back. It was like when you're in 7th grade and they're talking about high school, they're like, oh, high school is going to be so hard. And then you get to high school and you kind of do it. And then you're high school, they're like, oh, college is going to be so hard. And you just do it after college. Then they're like, okay, the sort of received wisdom that the next stage is somehow undoable. You just do, right? So like, yeah, there will be failures, but there is a great entrepreneurs that I've met. There's definitely a fait accompli, like this is happening about it. And the world can sense this. Like there is research all over the place. And Wes Cow wrote about this, I think, in her newsletter last week. Was the founder of Maven and other successful companies. She's a professional idol of mine, but she wrote there that people can sense both assuredness and insecurity. So assuredness that something's going to happen is that you don't quite know how, but that it will happen. And I've seen even, Amjad, he's very public about this, Amjad of Replit, just like a revenue for the year is going to be this, and just declares it. And then sure enough, it is. And like, I mean, I think it's like similarly here, it's like at GCAI, it's like, I had somebody relatively early on, somebody say that I wasn't technical. And my reaction was like, first of all, F you. But after that, my reaction was like, I don't know, dude, I got a law degree and 20 years of experience in tech and 2 patents. Like, you want to say I'm not technical? Watch me. And I found it actually motivating. And so I think it's like these rejections and the ability to take those rejections and kind of like, yeah, they're wrong. Like, that's just how it is. And, Amjad talks about this. Austin talks about this. Amjad mentioned on Twitter that people have been accusing him of delusions of grandeur since the 4th grade. And he's like, all right, cool, thanks. And so I'm a little bit the same way. Obviously different field, but I think you have to have that really thick skin. And, similarly, this comes up in other areas. It's not just entrepreneurship where if you have that, I guess the Gen Z way to say it is manifesting, but I definitely believe in that.
And do you think that a lot of the best ones manifest they kind of manifest this future, but because like, once again, I agree, it's not just entrepreneurs, it's everybody who is great at something, like the people who really do something great and well, they manifest it, but it's also because they just believe that is the reality, that's the future, and they're going to work as hard.
Exactly. And the thing is like, they call it with Steve Jobs, they called it like reality distortion field. But I've thought a lot about this, and it is their reality. Like, that is the reality that they believe. So it's not, it gets a little philosophical, but it's like, that's what they believe. So one of the entrepreneurs that I work for, one of the founders that I work for, not going to identify which, but long story short, we had an investor meeting and it didn't go particularly well. And afterwards, it was fairly clear to me that this particular investor was not going to invest. And in the course of the meeting, the investor opposite the table, I think it was a group of 3 of them. This was live because it's pre-COVID. Took their pen and like, I don't know, moved the pen on the table or like picked up their pen effectively. Meeting ends and the investors leave and we're debriefing. And the entrepreneur, the CEO at the time, said something like, I'm really sure they're going to invest. And I was kind of like, I didn't say anything. I was the general counsel and I, was just sort of there for getting the round logistics, et cetera. And I thought to myself, and I said, what makes you so sure? And he says, did you see how he like leaned in and grabbed his pen and wrote something down? I think he was like really engaging. It was one of these things where I was like, we were in the same meeting, dude. Like, that is not what happened. But it was like in this person's view, that's what it was. And that was their reality. And so like, I use that and that optimism. And there's been research, across fields that even in sort of medical situations, no matter what it is, that makes a difference. And so like, part of it is, for me, has been the legal training. Of course, you're trained with what goes wrong, right? Like, you're writing indemnity provisions or you're looking at risk from a compliance standpoint. So being able to maintain that kind of optimism, fait accompli drive while still having, an objective protection and review of the risks or of the situation, like that's been something that I've cultivated over time. And I do have to be careful, to surround myself with folks who will point out, the reality. Like, it's funny because I got a sales coach for a while and has been incredibly helpful on some of the kind of more logistical points of sales, because I didn't come up in sales. But I told him, I'm like, you're the face of reality for me. He's like happy to provide.
What is then the trade-off, right? So actually, this example is the one you gave of the investor is like a really cool example. How do you play off though the difference between like, I need to be overly optimistic and just always believe, like have this reality distortion field to essentially make it work, while also being somewhat grounded. Sure, you have people around you who are grounded, but you can't have people who are just naysayers. You also want people who believe with you, because if they're not believing with you, they're not going to stick around and go through all the tough times.
Yeah, so this is something that, my co-founder, Barty Pervikill, he's excellent. He is, a naysayer, truth teller, however you want to put it. But it's been something where the critique or the reality, in the sales coach example or the pen example, is like, if it comes from a place of like love, where it's like, this is, a lot of people talk about this, Molly Graham talks about this, the like feedback is a gift, where it's like, if I didn't care, would I critique whatever it was? No, I wouldn't. Be like, okay, fine, thanks. And then I just wouldn't hire you next time. Versus, with a vendor, I've had this, to sort of the levy point is like, is it worth correcting whatever it is, or do I move on? And that ability to like invest, like, to me, reflects commitment, and it reflects, love of the vision and understanding and all these things. So that's how I balance it. It is definitely,
we're doing a remodel, a small remodel of my house. And, my spouse, obviously, we're incredible marriage. He tends to be a little bit more the realist. So I'm like, let's do this. And he's like, so we're going to put a window in the air conditioner. Cool. I'm like, okay, sorry, that's not what I meant. So that kind of like clearly like working together with a more, some of the more tactical stuff that, and like for me, like I mentioned with lawyers, like we don't miss detail. So I think so much is like just seeing that detail. And that's another thing that the great entrepreneurs that I've observed, certainly, Zuck and Steve Jobs and, and Amjad and others, like they don't miss detail. And so I think it's that combination of the big vision, but the ability to see the detail.
And so how does that work between what's going to be the vision? I mean, it's one thing, right? A lot of entrepreneurs listening to this might say, well, I have a big vision. I can see the future, all these other things, right? If you're going down this path to be an entrepreneur, you have a real belief that you're going to do something different because it's not worth it otherwise. But then you also have to execute, right? I think it's kind of a truism or a statement that a lot of people say, right? It's vision, having ideas are a dime a dozen.
Ideas are free. Yeah. So my favorite story on this is a friend of mine had a particularly obnoxious ex-boyfriend, and he was like, we went. It was like we're in town for a wedding or something, and we all went to Dry Bar. Allie Webb, another great entrepreneur, and got blowouts for our hair. And long story short, this guy is like, I totally thought of Dry Bar. Like I it's like such a like obvious idea. I would have done this. I'm like, but you didn't do it, like dumbass. Like it was one of these like, that's not the same thing. And it's sort of like, so that's the extreme example. The other extreme is like Allie Webb. She's like, I started blow drying people's hair in my house. And then it got bigger and bigger and it became something. And similarly for me with GCAI, I started off teaching classes. I taught AI prompting classes to lawyers. And I very quickly realized that it needed to be a product. And, that was something where that ability to talk to customers and like make progress every week, like to me, it's like make progress every week. And, I did the, with Jason Calacanis, he's got this Founder University program and, we were affiliated with it. And even at other companies I've been at, we have weekly wins or like, what is the progress that you made this week? And if you didn't make progress this week, you're not achieving your vision, right? And like, it can be little things. It can be like, I sent a newsletter, I taught a class, I talked to 6 customers, I added this little feature or whatever it is, but it has to be something tangible. And, this is something that one of my, I had an executive coach when I was started interviewing and having bigger and bigger jobs. And he's like, the way to show this, and actually I just read last night, I read something that Mark Andreessen says the same thing, is tangible, measurable output week to week. And if it's literally something that didn't exist last week, and it could be, I signed a contract with a vendor to handle whatever it is. It could be like, for me, I had this newsletter, right? And I'm converting it to the website. Simple thing, but like that's going to help my SEO like crazy. And so, and then even just writing the newsletter one step at a time, right? So I think you have to have that tangible thing where you can't live in the clouds. You can't be my friend's obnoxious ex being like, I totally thought of Dry Bar, like, okay, whatever, you didn't do it. Like, that's the difference.
And what do you think? I mean, so it's funny you say some of those things. I mean, one at Levy, we do Friday Win. So I just actually had our Friday company and this call right before our call. We also started implementing, because I don't think we're moving fast enough. I implemented a new rule that anyone who owns sort of major projects that we have internally needs to send a report either every Friday or Monday with what did you accomplish last week? What is your big goal for this week? And what are your blockers? That's it. And you put it in Slack so everyone can see it, but also it ties to a document that everyone can read that tracks it week over week over week over week, because we're not moving fast enough in making those decisions. What do you think though? So digging a little bit further, right? So it's one thing to say, okay, it's like the obnoxious ex-boyfriend who said, well, I had that idea, he didn't do it. It's another thing then to go to founders like myself or yourself or other people who go do it, but still fail. So like, what is then the next level to the ones who actually get it done, where it's like, okay, look, I built it, I raised money, I got some customers, I did these things, yet it still failed. What are the next level to their ability to execute that gets them to how, the definition of excellence?
Yeah, I mean, this is tough, right? I mean, Jensen Huang, worth $70 billion, talks about how NVIDIA was on the brink of going under, and Amazon had to do had JP Morgan had to do a convertible note, for them to survive, right? So it's very difficult. I do think podcasts have a lot of survivor bias, but I mean, to answer your question, I mean, sometimes things fail, and maybe it's the size of the market, maybe it's too early, maybe it's, who knows what it is, but it's like, or maybe you weren't identifying with customers enough. Like, I mean, it could be n number of things, but if you are building something of value, there is a little bit of like, what is the value that unfolds, right? So, another classic one on this is, of course, Slack, right? He was building a video game company and then found that this messaging thing was like what people really liked. Now, it's true in that case, Stuart Butterfield, he had some money from Flickr and he had investors that allowed him that kind of second chance. But what I would say is build things that are incrementally of value. And then, maybe you have to go for the whole pie, right? There are definitely examples of that. Viva, I think they have like 6 customers and they're a public company because they went so deep on that vertical. It's different ways to do it. You also know your own strengths, right? If you come from PLG, don't build Viva. If you come from whatever it is, like double down on that and productize that. That's one thing that's new to me, or that I've realized more deeply of building GCAI, is the power of productizing yourself as a founder.
Yep.
Where it's like, me, I'm an in-house lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 20 years, a general counsel for 10. Like, that's the product that I'm building for. And so I'm much more likely to build something of value if whatever it is that I am is for that. Other examples too, but for me, that's been the surest pathway.
What about when you think of like Replit or Cruise, things like that, where, there were plenty of companies that were also trying to do self-driving cars who didn't have big exits. Same thing with Replit's market. Like why were they able to, was it luck, but just totally right timing? Or was it something about the founders themselves that enabled it to get to that next level? And is there even Amazon? I know you're there not early, but like,
armchair quarterbacking is sort of easy, but one of the things is like, I mean, in autonomous specifically, it was always very clear to me anyway that it was going to be billions with a B, not millions with an M, is this investment. And so unless you have something you can sell sort of straight away, there it was all the strategic deals, which I worked on and which, are make the press, like, is like Cruise really, really, truly broke out once it was and got cars on the road once it had the investment or, the acquisition from GM. If you're the right founder, Kyle Vogt, to the Vision Point, there's pictures of him kind of designing electric cars, toy matchbox cars and stuff like that at like 5 years old, right? So like this was actually something that he legitimately was the right founder for. Yeah.
So then, so going back to that definition sort of success, and maybe for Cruise, Replit, all these other great founders, how would they define it, right? So is it is excellence or even success, if you want to define it that way? Is it financial outcomes? Like certainly that's sort of the way a lot of people measure things, certainly in Silicon Valley and probably in America. Or is it other elements, like you built something that just changed the world? Or is it a combination of those things? Like in a sense, in sort of asking not only from what you see from them, but even for yourself as an entrepreneur today, what would success look like for you in GCAI?
So lawyers are super competitive. And one of the things that I've had to get okay with is like traditional markers of success, like grades. Like, so I did really well in law school, I was top of the class, etc. But that goes away. And it's like these traditional scholastic based markers of success are not what makes a difference in entrepreneurship. And the returns are not linear, right? It's not like you work, 5% harder, you're going to be 5% more successful. Like that's not a thing. And so you have like these breakthroughs and that's this compounding over time. So I would say it's reaching customers and making them happy. Like that's something that I learned at Amazon with a customer obsession and has been just a constant throughout my career and really an asset, both as a lawyer and now as an entrepreneur in BD and everything, is that kind of making your customers happy and successful. So it's really like achieving it through others is one. And then two is like, again, that progress, right? Like, are you achieving things? Are you putting points on the board? You have to look at it as like sort of the micro. And then, you look around and like, okay, a year later, it's like, okay, I've built this company, I've hired people, I've reached, X hundred customers. And, you have to, you can really mostly see it going backwards. If you look at it day to day, and there's a great, I think it's like Wait But Why does the cartoons, right? And he's got this incredible cartoon where it's like a guy in like little boxes or something. And over 1,000 of these little boxes, he's like, the box is always the same. But then by the end, it's like, this is like life. And so I think it's, to get super philosophical or meta about it, you have to kind of look at it on a horizon of years, but you have to, again, that week to week progress every day, I would say, is success. Now, that being said, things happen in instance. I read this week that another incredible entrepreneur, I think it's Emily Romer, the founder of Guild Education, incredibly successful, unicorn, $6 billion. She had a stroke. And so now she's no longer the CEO because that happened at 36 years old. And you're like, what the, oh my God. So life sort of happens that way. But, I think it's success is reaching customers, daily progress, measuring years.
And then how do you deal with her? How you either individually or also, of course, with all the people you've worked with, how do you deal with, you want to make progress every day for sure, but there's also so many ups and downs being an entrepreneur, right? There is like day to day, week to week, you're like, oh my God, did all of this stuff just happen today that I was not excited? I didn't wake up this morning. I had this happen to me. It's like, did not wake up this morning, this week, and this day, all these things are happening right now, unexpected. How do you get through it then? Like, what do you do to get through and be like, I'm going to go make progress and keep moving forward every day? Because is it because you believe you're like, I know this needs to be a reality and you just keep moving? Or like what?
Yeah. I mean, that resilience, it sounds like, and I mean, that's probably like a lot of your listeners, like you listen to it and you're like, oh, resilience. Yeah, whatever, yada, yada. But it's true. Like the volume of random stuff is much higher. And look, you have volume of random stuff in your everyday life, no matter the job. When I was a GC, it was like, one of our customers is like, he's like, I was a janitor in chief. Like all the crap came to me. And, so I was used to that sort of crisis, but with being a CEO now and being a founder, like it could be very random. Like just the randomness of it is like, like one of our team members had a tornado and you're like, oh, okay. Like, I guess that project's not going out the door. All right. Like that's fine tomorrow or whatever day. And, but you kind of have to, I see it, and this is where like, we met at the parenting thing. It's a little bit like parenting. Like, you can't return the baby. Like, yeah, you have a bad night, like you move forward and you're like, maybe you get a bouncy ball or you get a swing or whatever, but like, it's not an option to stop. And so like, I definitely think that like, this is how it is. And like, you have a bad week, but like, it's also a little bit of like dwelling. Like there is, I've thought about this a lot. Somebody told me, a while back, they're like, oh, Cecilia, you've had a charmed life. I was like, I mean, yes, I've been very lucky to have my health, but like, I've had my randomness too. You just like move forward. And, somebody else asked me, when I got the GC role at Lambda School, like Austin is an entrepreneur that so many people look up to. It's a fascinating legal role because they're regulated by state. There's aspects of fintech, aspects of education, aspects of employment law. So as far as GC roles go, it was a great job and plum. And I got a text from a friend that was like, how do you land these plum GC jobs all the time? And I was kind of like sort of offended, but I was also sort of like, I worked at it. And by the way, I spoke to a lot of companies to find the right fit. And some of them I wasn't. And it's just like, okay, somebody rejects me, like move on. And like similarly for venture capital funding, I read somewhere it's like 69 pitches to 1 yes. And I'm south of that. Don't have anything to announce depending on when this airs. But even still, if you get rejected 50 times or, Stitch Fix, Katrina Lake says she was rejected, hundreds of times. If you take any of those as truth, then yeah, you're going to have a hard time. Like, you can't, you have to, it's like, you can't return the baby, I would say is my pithy summary there.
And I just think actually baby is a good example too, in the sense that I joke with my friends sometimes that being a parent in at least the point in life that I'm at is like, every day's been kind of same shit, different day a little bit. Like, it's like, okay, you get up, got a lot of work to do, got to get through that, got kids up, got to take them to school every morning, get them ready, do all the same things. But every day things change a little bit and you see all this interesting progress and it's something new. It's not always perfect progress. It's not always in the up and right direction, but good things are happening and you get to learn every day about it. And to me, at least, that's that brings me joy, that I get to learn these new things. And so it gives you perspective, I think, as well.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, and I was talking with one of our investors is also a dad, and he says that he actually finds that founders with kids, he finds them more effective. And and I think part of it is that, where it's like that stick-to-itiveness and that taking joy in the little things, right? Like like the 3-year-old age, a lot of people say that that they have a problem with it. I think it's just lovely, the stuff that she comes out with. Like she's like, "Oh, could I have a cookie? Because it would be delightful." You're like, how old are you? Like, it's just amazing.
And what do you think, actually, so on that note of the sort of the fundraising story, it's going back to the one that you talked about. How did that, so the founder thinks, oh, this VC is definitely going to invest. And you're like, that's not what I saw at all. It sounds like the VC did not invest. How did that founder handle it? Did they just say, you know what, on to the next, all good, I was wrong? And did they say lessons still to be learned, or that VC is a total idiot and I'm just going to ignore that?
Yeah, I mean, in his case, the company ended up using internal investors, and so it ended up being a sort of follow-on round with internal folks. But the macro point of like, how do you respond to rejection is like, I would say it's quite similar to when you're in when you're in a corporate role. Like, right? So all of us have had the experience, if you've worked in a big company, of having an annual review or a biannual review or what have you. And oftentimes it comes with 360. Sometimes the feedback is good. Sometimes it's not. And the ability to suss that out is part of your professional maturity. And, the person, again, going back to others, so Deb Liu, she's the CEO of Ancestry, incredibly effective CEO. And she says that it's sometimes feedback can be not fair, but still worth taking. So, she had a role, I think she tells a story in her newsletter about, she had a role where essentially she was basically set up to fail. But in the process of that, the feedback came back that was like, negative feedback. And she's like, yes, some of it was situational to that project, but there were some nuggets in there about how, in this case, she was being perceived. And she's like, perception is reality in some ways, so let me address those. And, maybe in her case, it was gendered, which I agree with, or it was associated with race. Like, I have seen that. And nevertheless, like, this is the reality that we're in. And so if that's the feedback that you get, engage. And so like, but there is sometimes feedback that is not valid. And sometimes it's feedback that's situational to the environment, right? So this is my other favorite story. The founder of Instacart, Apoorv Mehta, I think he was a level 4 or level 5 at Amazon and got his promotion rejected. And it's like, well, clearly that's a false negative. This guy went on to build a multi-billion-dollar public company straight from being an engineer rejected for his L5 promo at Amazon. Like, and so then it's like, if he would have taken that feedback that was like, oh, you need to grow, you can't manage people, whatever the feedback was, too seriously, we wouldn't have Instacart, right? And so like, this is like that engagement. That being said, I've had a tremendous professional growth from people that were really into feedback. So Molly Graham was CEO of Lambda School and oversaw my work for a time, and gave me very clear feedback that's like, hey, that if you want to be just a GC, here's how you should behave. If you want to be more of a CLO and more engaging with these other functions, I recommend this, that, and the other. And I did it, and a quarter later, I'm like, here you go. And then we made it happen.
So speaking about all these people, how do you create the culture that gives you the ability to give that feedback and help your entire team grow and get better? Because my assumption is, and tell me if this is an accurate assumption, a lot of the organizations you've worked at that were the most successful had a sort of resilient culture that enabled the team to give that honest feedback so their team can grow without people being like, I totally disagree, I'm quitting tomorrow because I don't, which happens, right? Organizations, you give negative feedback. Some people are like, yeah, I disagree, this organization sucks, I'm out. So what did they do to create a culture that can handle that sort of, one, the ups and downs of just startup life, because it's not, every day is not peachy and wonderful, but also the harsh feedback where it's like, we need to grow and all do better every day?
Yeah, I mean, this is tough, right? Like, and I think it's been part of my own professional evolution is embracing feedback. And I think it's creating an environment for it. I think it's like, it comes down to accountability a little bit. So as CEO and at every level, and this is something that the organization I've been in have emphasized, is like everyone at every level has something that they can do better. And, whatever it is, like, you probably sort of know. Like, that's one thing that also helped me is that seeing themes in feedback over time. And it's like, okay, am I going to ever be world class at this particular thing? Maybe not. But is it a blind spot where it's like 3 people have mentioned it over the course of 3 years? Then it's like you really have to focus on it. So internally as a culture, I think it's like 3 ways. Show people what good looks like. So when you're giving feedback that, like, let's say a newsletter or something isn't good, then it's like, okay, good looks like this. And they have a model to go from. Do it like in the moment is the other thing. And the third thing is like, assume good intent, I think is a little bit loaded, but it's more just like the example that I use is like, when you pick up the phone and it might be a telemarketer, some people are like, who is this? And they're sort of like, start the call with this like, FU telemarketer. Versus like, you could just answer like, if you don't know, like for me, it could be my kid's school, it could be whatever, like I try to start from a baseline of positivity of like, hey, maybe you forgot the attachment. And then like, oh crap. And usually the person, if you've hired for a level of diligence, and they have to want the excellence. So to me, it's like if the person wants the excellence, that's what I try to filter for in the culture. And you can see markers of this and you can see in the application process, right? So a bunch of entrepreneurs I was talking with the other day said they do that you have to record a Loom as part of your application. And he's like, 95% of people don't include the Loom. He's like, so he doesn't interview them.
We've thought about doing a Loom actually ourselves. Same idea. I mean, we have an application that we do ourselves too, and you tell, are people a good writer? Do they write clearly? Do they use punctuation? Like stylistic sort of things. It's shocking by how many people don't do that. You're like, well, that's clearly not a fit. Did you find then that? So does that culture though come from the top, and then where does that? How do you set the culture where you have these high expectations while also being vulnerable? Or should you be vulnerable, right? So like, I would imagine like a Jeff Bezos probably wasn't all that vulnerable, but also he also had so much success he didn't need to be. Or a Steve Jobs was probably not that vulnerable because he had this massive reality distortion field.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that fine line, right? Between being a founder who is like, I know what the future is and I'm better than all of you. So kind of like get up to my level or don't join. And Elon Musk is probably famously that same way too.
Yeah.
But also, and those are easy examples because they're kind of big, they're famous, but I'm sure there's lots of founders who are completely the opposite and frankly, far more better IQ, EQ, all these other things, who build really successful companies who just in a quieter way.
Yeah. I have this debate a lot. It's like, do you have to, putting it in a slightly less diplomatic way than you did is like, do you have to be an a-hole? Like, so Alexis Ohanian, when it came out about Elon Musk having like such a troubled childhood, and similarly to Steve Jobs and Bezos in some ways as well, it's like, do you have to have had a terrible childhood to be greatly successful? And Alexis Ohanian is like, nah, I'm gonna give the counterpoint. Like, I had a great childhood, grew up in Maryland, whatever. And I guess what I would say to your question is like, do you have to be vulnerable as a CEO and founder? Like, I don't know. I mean, I would say that some of the greats I worked for were not particularly vulnerable, and I would put Bezos in that bucket. But actually, no, I wouldn't put Bezos in the bucket. Bezos says customers are divinely discontent. Like he likens them to God, where it's literally it's just constant discontent. So if you're trying to meet this standard that is literally unmeetable, like that is actually a vulnerability. And so like, to me, it's like that there's this like target that you want to hit, that you set it so high, right? Steve Jobs and like not blue enough or whatever it is. It's like, that exists. Like Steve Jobs knew that there was a shade of blue that was better. And that was where he pushed the team. And so like for him individually, like,
do I have stuff I need to work on? I say on podcasts. I just said 3 times. So there's things that I know that I have to do, and when my team points them out to me, I thank them.
And how do you then hire for the best team to be part of that? So what have you seen as the best hiring practices to build that group that can be vulnerable with you, but maybe take your criticisms and be to some extent at your level? I don't think many companies have a full team that is really ever at the full founder level, but you also want people who can kind of keep up and once again are excited by that vision in what you're planning to build, because it's something totally insane. That's why you're doing it. Is this has not been created in the world before, and you need people who are going to jump on board with you to do that and do it at a level that you at least can accept, even if it's not quite at your level.
Yeah, so I saw this advice, and I will say there's a little bit of take my advice. I'm not using it here, but let me say it anyway. And say aspirationally. Great advice I saw was, when you're interviewing, interview through, would I work for this person? And that filters a ton, because it's also would I learn, how can I learn from this person is what that says. And a big step in my career, and I think people have had this being an executive or being a founder, is when you first hire somebody who's a deeper expert and better at the job than you. So I remember very clearly this happening to me. And the best example I can think of was at Cruise, where I oversaw the intellectual property program, so the patent program. And and she's still there, Olivia Tai. She runs the patent program. She is the best patent expert in the Valley, full stop. Very, very good. She runs the program incredibly well. She knows the tech. She went to MIT. She was at Oracle and helped build their patent program. And it was such a joy to see her operate, that it was I'm how did I get so lucky to have this person on my team? And so what I focused on was what are the areas where she can be even more amazing? And so for me, I've always, like I said, been obsessed with the customer obsession and with managing stakeholders and with advancing the business. So it was all business advice that I gave her. On the legal side, yes, we would debate and spar, and I had some interesting things to assist with, but it was that advancement. And very quickly after I left, I told the GC of Cruise at the time, I'm promote her immediately, give her this and this, and thankfully Cruise has done that, and it's been amazing. But that experience of would I work for this person? How can I use the skills that I have to make them even better? And that's on the sort of how you work side. The what you do, the ambitious goals and OKRs and all these things are other tools. I will say in hiring, it has been tough. Don't underestimate, when you're in an Amazon or a Cruise, the quality of applicants you just attract is it's very easy to have a very high bar, I will say, versus startups. It's just a lot more work. You have to build a name, and you have to all this while building a company. So that's the part that I think is a challenge for me, and probably for a lot
what percent of your time do you think you spend recruiting right now for one, what you need today, but of course you're probably also thinking, what do I need in 6 to 12 months when I get my next fundraise and all these other pieces? What percentage of your time do you spend doing that? And then are there tips and tricks you try to, beyond saying I want to only hire people that I would work for, are there other things you put in place to try to do that?
Oh man, not enough. So we, not enough time recruiting right now. We're still really focused on building. And, to the point where, the outsourcing is super tempting and nice. And it's okay, how long is this going to tide me over, and thinking about that. But, I also look at some of the aspects of company building as being recruiting. So for me, the kinds of people I would want to recruit are people interested in my business, right? So lawyers, legal adjacent. And so even through the newsletter, I get, a lot of really high quality folks just being can I intern for you? Can I work for you? Just in the abstract. And so I would say if you include this sort of brand and company building, it's a significant chunk of time. But actually interviewing and things, this is confession, not enough.
It is confession. You're supposed to help be the real. And actually, I'm sort of a
exactly
segue into just AI overall. It's really about GC.ai, but AI is on the lips of everybody today for good reason. At the same time, I don't think many people really fully grasped how much it's going to change the nature of almost everything we do. Maybe walk through at a high level, like what GC AI is doing. You've also been an investor and advisor to a bunch of AI companies. What are all of these companies doing that is sort of different with AI than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago when, it was big data or machine learning was sort of the name of the game. And now suddenly it's AI, everything. But is it really different? And if it is, how should all of us be thinking about our jobs, including how do we hire? Who do you hire for in a world where it's AI, or do you use AI to help you hire? Like all these questions, like how do all these things change in what is exciting about that or scary?
Yeah. So in terms of what changed, for me, the shift to generative AI and specifically GPT, I can't understate how important that was, because I've been in and around AI a long time. I was counsel for Alexa in 2013. But generative AI is the first tech where you can give it an unstructured question and get a better answer than in some of those previously structured formative AI that you mentioned.
Talking to Alexa,
right? So
even today is not a fantastic, perfect experience. It's very sort of one answer that's only partially correct. And if it doesn't, mine still messes up. I remember it messed up yesterday for something I asked it. So like, it's not great still, but I know I asked ChatGPT, yes, boom, 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 here you go. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Here you go. Yeah. I mean, it's very, so that technically, the attention is all you need paper and the advent of AI, but I was very lucky to be at Replit. Replit had a deal with OpenAI back in 21. And, I worked on that deal and saw what would be AI as applied to software. So software, the language that you're writing in, JavaScript or what have you, it's relatively structured and the language makes a difference to the output. And so AI as applied to software is perfect. But guess what? It's similar for law, right? We have structured things in contracts. We have a wider than any other field history in writing back to, the Constitution and prior for US law. And so taking this technology that has the ability to morph knowledge, it was just so profound for me to see applying AI to legal work. I previously hadn't really been excited about tech for legal, a little bit for like with being able to search big databases and even just literally use search queries as an associate. I did this in discovery and so on. But this was something that was my actual legal work. So it wasn't contract management. It wasn't pushing files around. It wasn't databases. This was, I am literally drafting something and I can do it in a 10th, a 5th, a 20th of the time. And that to me is like, okay, the best way that this was put was it was a user story. So I talked to one of our users, one of our best users, and asked him like, how do you think about this? And in his case, he is an outside general counsel for a few companies. And he disclosed that he's using GCAI or using AI to his clients as part of the ethical responsibility of the bar. And one of them kind of asked him about it. And I said, well, what did you say? And he said, you get me on hour 1 for the strategy part instead of getting me on hour 5, 4 hours after I've manually assembled a contract. He's like, you get that fresh brain, you get the most creative, the most strategic, because the grunt part is done. And it's really like the best analogy is like, if you watch basketball from, the 80s or even the 90s, that was before the whole profession started lifting weights. So you see these pictures of Michael Jordan and he's like kind of scrawny. And then he starts lifting weights. He starts practicing on game days and does 2-a-days and all these things through his coach. And both he and the entire profession now, the idea that a basketball player wouldn't lift weights is like, it's absurd, right? So like the entire profession, the level of the game has increased. That is what will happen with law. It's very clear to me that will happen. Talked with lawyers across the board. I'm giving a talk at the American Association of Marriage Lawyers. So they're thinking like, okay, if you can quickly calculate someone's assets, how strong can you make your divorce case? If you can, talking to a plaintiff's lawyer the other day,
He said he used just vanilla ChatGPT during a deposition. The witness was not being cooperative, giving 12 questions that I could use to break through on this issue. He said, 3 of them were garbage, but 9 of them were great. And he's like, on my own, I would have thought of 5 probably. And broke through the deposition. He's like, guess what? We're bringing more cases. Watch out, companies. And so I was like, okay, like hearing that, I think the Michael Jordan kind of MBA level rises. We're going to see that on a mass scale.
What does that mean for the legal profession? Not in the, like, from a kind of jobs, career perspective. Does it mean there's fewer lawyers? Does it mean people are out of work? Or what? Or does it mean there's more lawsuits? Like, what is it? What does it mean from a kind of business perspective or sort of profession perspective?
I think the legal issues will keep up, and there will be more and newer legal considerations. And it's even just including within regulating AI, right? So I don't. We've seen tech innovation in the law before, in fact, constantly, right? So Chief Justice Roberts even wrote about AI. Literally, this Chief Justice of the Supreme Court wrote in a report that I think the way he put it, he said, it may well be that legal research will soon be unimaginable without AI. So that's the wording he used. But he said, but you have to have caution and humility. And then he explained it. But in his paper, he explained basically the advent of electronic filing, right? So are there fewer lawsuits today because you can file by PDF at the court website instead of physically going to court and stamping your complaint? No, there's the same, if not more lawsuits, right? And so these things that make it easier, yes, there are certain types of legal analysis that are quaint. But the example that I tell is when I was in law school, we had law school is divided into sections. So you have the whole law school class, and then you have sort of small sections. For whatever reason, at my law school at Berkeley, half of the people the year that I was a first year were assigned to still use the books, like literally go pull out physical books, look up cases in physical books. The other half was allowed to only use LexisNexis. So one group got to did both. The other just used LexisNexis. Thankfully, I was in the group that used Lexis or Westlaw, regardless of the electronic search. And am I a worse lawyer? Like, no, like that's just like ridiculous, right? Like, and the concept that if you were a lawyer today and we're like, hey, you're not going to use Google, you're going to just use the books, that would be malpractice. And so I literally think that that's where we're going. And I have this debate among legal tech folks, and users of GCAI. It's like, when is it going to be malpractice to not use AI in the law? Because we have a duty of diligence to our clients. We're not allowed to bill for 5 hours for something that should have taken 3. Or, if we are, we have to think about it and be deliberate about it under our professional rules. So that's what I would say for the law. But I'm energized by it. I want to play at a higher level. So I'm energized by it, and so are our customers. Like, whether that means fewer folks, maybe, but it also means if you're a company defending against a plaintiff's lawyer with more resources, okay, then you similarly have to use AI.
Having all those tools at your disposal, I mean, it in a sense, I agree with you. Like, almost for every profession, it's sort of malpractice to think you're not going to go use those tools. Like, why? I mean, for me, once again, I mentioned my first job in Silicon Valley was a company that was essentially using technology to get rid of doc review. When I first left law school, I had friends who went and did doc review. It was like an easy, quick job, make pretty good money. And you're just sitting in a massive warehouse reviewing documents by hand. Like, that is a crazy idea that it would still happen that way today. And yet people didn't do that all that long ago. And now you're moving to this next world. And
it was not.
That is where I think every profession has to think, okay, should I be scared of this? Like, sure, some lawyers might lose their job, but the smart lawyer is going to say, I want to embrace this new technology the same way I embrace using a computer, right? Sure, you could be the lawyer who's still writing everything by hand.
Exactly.
But you're going to be slower, and you won't be able to either. Best case for you means you just won't take as many jobs on and have as much you can bill. Worst case is you literally are obsolete.
Nobody hires you. Yeah. No, I mean, and it's also like, I think it's, the state bar associations had a debate over whether email was proper for lawyers to use. And this is not that long. These are on the web. And it's like, now the concept is, so we kind of know, we've seen this rodeo, right? And we know where this is going. And I think there is, it's natural to have some
some, trepidation and caution, humility, all these things. But yeah, I 1,000% agree with you. And the people that I speak with, like, they want to get the job done, right? They want to move forward. They want to support the business. Like, that's also the beauty of at GCI, we happen to target in-house. But similarly, the very best outside lawyers, they're about outcomes for the client, and that's what you pay for. Like, there's a famous story that I think it was, I can't remember if it was, I think it was Wachtell, which is like the very elite law firm. They were helping with, the Revlon duties is like the famous case of like, what are your duties as a corporate director? And long story short, in the sort of leverage buyout, hostile takeover kind of thing that made their firm, companies pay them $1 million for advice overnight because it was like, this is what you should do. And, that kind of outcomes-based thing, I do anticipate we'll see more of that.
Are there other things, like when you look down into the future, we're still like, what, in the first inning, use a baseball analogy, I suppose, like, of AI. Look out 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. Where do you think, as someone who's in a space, where does this take all of us? And then to keep it sort of on focus on just like running a business, what does that mean for a business leader, for an entrepreneur, when you think about all the AI tools that are coming out and coming down the pipe, even in the next few months, but let alone years?
Big debate among, a lot of the titans of Silicon Valley around, will we have one person?
So I literally wrote this. Funny you mentioned that. I literally wrote this to my team earlier on this sort of topic. I want to hear what you say. I'm not a Silicon Valley titan, but I would think we are absolutely going to have single person unicorns in the relative near future. Can define maybe what near future means, but
yeah, I mean, so I think it's possible. I think what is the time horizon of that? Shrinking for sure. There is an aspect, and this is something that came from that several people have said, but Amjad says it a lot at Replit, was, okay, with AI, someone who's not a software engineer can kind of become one. Someone who is a software engineer becomes a 10x engineer, or 10x, 100x, whatever. The 10x engineer becomes a 100x engineer, or becomes that founder of the one-person unicorn. And that idea that it's you but better, you but more, like your vision, your everything, and the implementation can increasingly be handled by AI, like that's fascinating. And we see this in macro levels and micro levels. So here's an example. When we were doing early research interviews for GCAI, one of the people I spoke with, I said, when you draft a contract, walk me through your process. And she told me. And then at the end, I'm like, well, so what do you do to QA a contract before, a new template? She's like, I always want to make sure that the apostrophes are like curly and the quotes and everything. I'm like, okay, how much time do you spend on that? 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And that is not productive time. And that is ridiculous. Like, there should be an AI for that. Like, and we've all had this experience when you're in Google Slides and it like makes the bullets the wrong size. And you're like, what are you doing? Fix this. This is ridiculous. Enough people have that where it's like, okay, this should not be so hard. And so like, that's where I see a lot of this. It's going to be like, what is it, like slowly and then all at once kind of thing, where it's like similarly where, I was still in that transition period in law school with half the people looking at the books and half the people, using the other. And so, I think we'll see it. I'm excited that this podcast is recorded, and we'll see how many of our two predictions are right.
Do you have a time frame for when you think some of this stuff happens where it really, because I feel like a lot of the AI stuff is it's really cool. Some of it, though, is sort of hyped to some extent still. It's like, hey, like, I'm an AI for this, I'm an AI for that. I'm like, okay, like, I actually am still going to hire someone to do this job because I think they'll be better. They should use essentially an AI co-pilot to some extent because they should be more efficient and better. But it might just be a product that says AI X, but it's really just like, they're using a tool just like they should be using a tool to do whatever their job is. When do we really get there where it really becomes the AI is doing a large percentage of the work versus being just a slightly better version of the last piece of tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my experience with self-driving vehicles or with autonomous vehicles is the most relevant here, where, full autonomy, car drives down the street and goes to pick you up. That's kind of one thing. But every car now has cruise control. Even the cheapest cars have basic cruise control.
And then, sort of adaptive cruise control being the next level. And, you're going to have a situation where similarly to rear view backup cameras, now those are government mandated. So like, when do we get to a point where these things are so commonplace, even that they're in fact required? So, similarly here, I think the equivalent of driver assist, so helping my friend get rid of the curly Q apostrophes, like that's something that like Microsoft, that should be standard. Like Google should just do that. And like similarly, Grammarly, I've been a staunch user of Grammarly. In fact, they asked me to be like an advocate for them. But I'm at like 19 million words over 3 years, which is like crazy. But I pride myself to be a good writer. Writing is my profession as a lawyer. And so, but I still like that. So applying AI, even for the highest levels, like we're going to see it across the board to, again, give everybody these threshold capabilities. And then we're going to see it, experts leveraging AI, the vertical AIs that you talked about. So I'm definitely seeing that with GCAI on the in-house legal side. We're going to see it with, there's one called Sheets, which is basically, called Equals, which is AI for effectively biz ops and planning. You're going to see it just across. The Poggio is doing it for sales prospecting. I mean, like, pick your thing.
On each
but because
regular basis.
Exactly. Well, the thing is like, what is that tipping point? It's going to be different for different people. And I think that, the crossing the chasm, again, it's like that book just proves more and more useful. But I think it's going to go faster, I think, than other tech, because the utility is so clear, right? So in the case of GCAI, the user that said something that took him 5 hours takes him half an hour, like, you feel that those 4.5 hours that you got back, you're like, all right, take my money.
It leads to a better world for you as an individual. It hopefully leads to a better world for their customers. And hopefully that leads to a better world for everybody else. I mean, I do have it. This is sort of off topic for the podcast, but like, I have concerns about society because it is going to move so fast. In humans' ability and society's ability to adjust to a lot of things is not really probably set up for the speed of change that we are seeing and probably will see, right? I mean, to your point, I want to ask almost about like Grammarly is sort of this fun example. What is your level of pride of ownership of your writing? So you think, I'm a good writer, but it sounds like most of your writing for 19 million words is actually, not plausibly
Grammarly assisted,
augmented writing. Is it really your writing, or is it just that or all of your writing now is better, or it's become different? Like you're almost a symbiotic of the AI plus your own writing.
I think symbiosis is the right word. I definitely, being able to direct it, I think, is great. There was a debate this week on X about Medium came out and banned AI writing. But it's like, what even is AI writing? Like, exactly, it's my use of Grammarly to like, I personally don't use. My biggest mistake is that I don't like to use I'll be like on it instead of I'm on it or whatever, and things like that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I should I take offense that my writing is not mine because Grammarly? I don't know, Matt. I don't know, Adam.
Better, like that's sort of the thing, right? Are you better?
It's better. That's the thing. It's better. So it doesn't matter. It's like it is all these debates. I was talking with my father-in-law about tech adoption, and he said in the 70s. When heart transplants first came out, people were like, is this ethical? And now, like, of course it's ethical. Like, but what? Like, it did, this is how people come to adopt tech. And it's not going to be clean, but I also think, is the world better because we're not looking up stuff in books? Probably. But that being said, is there joy to like going to these libraries and the smell of books and the tactile page? Like,
but sure, the same thing, the joy of going on a horseback ride, but I'm not going to use that as my daily transport anymore. I mean, it's sort of increased. Those people, I don't think I don't see them going around San Francisco too often in horses. In order to bring this back sort of to some extent where we started, like what does that mean then for when you're hiring and building a team and culture and like be a great entrepreneur? What are the sort of people you want to bring on board who are okay with embracing that level of change? And what does that mean for teams and companies as we're going into this new era?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely it's you got to want it, right? And going back to the parent analogy, some people love the infant stage and some people don't.
Like a girlfriend of mine is like, I wish my kids would have started at age 5, because it's like they can kind of do their own thing. And so that's what I would say is like there is a startup hunger and desire, and you get to a point where you don't need that anymore, and that's, I think, an aspiration. I hope to get to that point, de-risk, when you raise money, and de-risk in various ways, and revenue, and being able to control your own destiny and all those things. But I think the main, I don't think I understood. I worked for, when I was a fractional GC, I worked for a CEO who, I asked him a similar question, what's the most important thing? And he said, commitment to the mission. And I remember thinking like, well, what about competence, or what about whatever? But I think it's like, it has to be both. Like the mission commitment is part of it, but the liking the baby stage, liking the possibilities, and believing that the possibilities are great.
Commitment, vision, though, or the mission imply greatness in other ways. Like you have to like every stage, because it sort of implies those spaces. Like you can't achieve your mission
and stay at the bottom stage. Yes, exactly. But and again, I think that it's like raising kids. Like, I happen to really enjoy the baby phase, but I have teenagers now, and it is lovely. Like just seeing them become their own people, and it's just like maybe it's just joy. Back to your point, that it's just the joy of every stage. I don't know.
You can jump around really quickly for one other second, then one last question for you, which is, but think through all the people you've worked with, the ones who are really, really good. What is their ability, or lack thereof, to delegate? And I ask that in two different ways. One is obviously delegate to team members, but then given all the AI discussion we've having, delegate to AI or delegate to other tools that can do this stuff better. Are they great at it? Are they bad at it? How does that work?
Again, this is the like confession time, not enough. I need to I'm very good at delegating to AI, getting better at delegating to people. And it's different as a founder. It is different than as a manager, when I was at Cruise or other places. How do you, let's see, do you have to be great at delegating?
You think through all those entrepreneurs you've worked for, or Ollie is a CEO.
Yeah, they, different qualities, right? Like, some people are better at it than others, right? And sometimes, the ability to operate at all altitudes is important, right? So Zuck famously still codes, right? And I think that's important, because being in touch with things at every level, and Amazon has a principle called dive deep. And it literally says leaders are in touch with every level. They audit frequently. When data and anecdote differ, they have the ability to get in there and figure out why. And that, to me, that detail orientation, it's tough, because you have to really have both the detail and the vision. And so I think in the details, like, you will get criticized as a bad manager sometimes, right? And Michael Keller, the founder of French Laundry, I think he was fired from like 9 jobs before he founded French Laundry. And he's famously, not great to work for. But he would say, to your point earlier in the talk, and Fred's circling this back, he would say that that's what greatness requires. And I'm not Michael Keller. I pretty good cook, but it's like, is it fun to cook with me in my kitchen? My niece would say no, right?
But the question is, are you a great or an excellent entrepreneur, especially when it comes to legal side? And that sort of is the question. It's like, look, it sounds like you do have a incredibly high bar for excellence. You expect it of yourself every single day.
I do.
And therefore, it comes down. I'm sure your team, if I were talking to them, would say the same thing. They'd probably get annoyed by that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, my co-founder is probably, his standards are very, very high as well. And so we actually were a great team, because he's like, is this excellent? Is this great? How can this be better? And it's like, that's actually something, a great book for your listeners, is called Power Questions. And it basically, cheesy title, but essentially it's questions you can ask that elicit deep responses. And one of them was, is this as good as it can be? Nothing, no more. Just you get a piece of output. Hey, you think this is as good as this can be? I think the person, the author of the book, did research. 50% of the time, people are like, no, it's not. Let me come back to you. And so it's like literally something simple as that.
Great question. Great thing to ask. So on that note, is a great way to sort of end things to some extent. In a question like to ask every single person, and maybe it's sort of, I can ask it a different way using this question you just had, like, what is the one single piece of advice that you would give to every entrepreneur, budding entrepreneur, currently entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, failed entrepreneur, you name it? Like, this is the thing. If you could do one thing and one thing only, what is that one thing to achieve excellence, however you want to define it. And we've defined it many ways in this call, but what is that one thing?
Oh, wow. I love this theme, Adam. This makes me so happy. So I think I'm going to go with just do it. One foot in front of the other. That's one foot in front of the other. Yeah, that's what I would say. It's literally like you can see the horizon, but getting to the horizon is one step. And so that's right.
That's great advice because it's very easy to lose track, I think, of that sometimes with the ups and downs and just say every day is a big day. Get back out there. Go do it.
Exactly. Amazing. This was so much fun. Thank you for having me
on. And how can folks get in touch if they want to learn more about you, learn more about GC? I mean, I assume gc.ai, so it's very easy to find.
No, so sadly, it's not that domain where. So my marker of success, I'll let you in, is when I can afford to buy that domain. But right now, it's getgc.ai or gcai.co. And the company name is GCAI, General Counsel AI. And I'm on Twitter, Cecilia Ziniti, ceciliaziniti.com. You'll find me and we can put it in the show notes. But I have a bunch of other podcasts and always looking for content ideas. And of course, if you are an entrepreneur with an in-house GC, get them in touch with me. I'll get them on our pilot.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.